Alright! Welcome to Rockstar! Now, just so you all know, we're gonna cover this topic as fast and as completely as we can. Just the way you like it. Thanks for watching!
Chapter 1. The Writing of the U.S. Constitution. It's May in the year 1787, and the United States of America is falling apart. You ride toward Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on horseback in the rain, hoping to arrive in time for the start of a convention that will redesign the government and hopefully save the country. Although the United States is only 11 years old, the current national government is proving powerless to hold the 13 states together, and you're afraid for the future of your young country. In fact, the United States of America in 1787 is much less like a unified nation and much more like a fragile association of 13 small countries. The states are printing their own money, maintaining their own armies, bickering with each other over territorial boundaries, and taxing each other's goods. They're making treaties with foreign powers, something only Congress is supposed to do. Congress has no authority to levy taxes and has to ask the states for money. The national currency, called the Continental Dollar, is virtually worthless. There's talk of dissolving the Union completely or dividing it into smaller countries. Many people are feeling unsure that the United States can be saved. So how has it come to this? Why is the government so weak and ineffective? Can't the president do something? Well, in fact, there is no president. There's no Supreme Court or even a national court system. There is a Congress, but it only has one house, where each state gets one vote. The national government, also called the federal government, has been deliberately designed to be weak. Why? Because the 13 individual states were suspicious of a strong federal government. After all, each state had been founded as a colony independent of the others, and had established their own governments long before the creation of the United States. People thought of themselves as citizens of Virginia or Rhode Island or Massachusetts, not so much as Americans. They'd unified to fight against England, the most powerful country in the world, and under the leadership of George Washington, they'd been victorious. But with the war finally over, each state was anxious to protect its own economic interests, at the expense of national unity. The original federal government was created in a document called the Articles of Confederation. It was envisioned as an agreement between the 13 states, in, quote, a firm league of friendship with each other, where each state retained its sovereignty, freedom, and independence. Congress had no power to regulate the national economy or establish national laws, and it couldn't levy taxes. It could ask the states for money, and the states were supposed to comply, but in fact, the requests were usually ignored. Congress could print money, but since each state had its own currency, the federal money was next to worthless. Congress could make treaties with foreign governments, but the states made their own treaties and undercut the authority of the fledgling government. Congress could declare war, but it had no money to pay for soldiers, ammunition, or ships. So this is why you're riding your horse to Philadelphia in the rain, on muddy roads that aren't often more than holes in the bushes. Delegates from all 13 states are meeting there to discuss the future of the country. Called the Federal Convention, it'll be attended by the most important and well-known Americans, like George Washington, the hero general of the Revolution, and Benjamin Franklin, who at 81 years old was one of the nation's most experienced politicians and thinkers. Also in attendance will be James Madison, who will later write the Bill of Rights and serve as the nation's fourth president. His contributions to creating the new government will become so important that historians will call him the father of the Constitution. Philadelphia, with 40,000 residents, is the largest city in the country at this time, with a thriving port that brings goods and people from around the world. Delegates will be meeting at Independence Hall, the same building where George Washington was named commanding general in 1775, and where the Declaration of Independence was adopted on July 4, 1776. These delegates are the cream of the crop of American society. Some had famous roles in the Revolution, while others have served in their state legislatures or in the Continental Congress. Many are college-educated or practice law. Washington's participation is especially important. He's the most famous and respected man in America. His presence gives the Federal Convention the legitimacy it needs for its decisions to be accepted by the 13 states. Traveling to Philadelphia in 1787 is a long journey. There are no cars, no planes, no trains. On horseback, you might hope to cover 40 miles a day, with stops at local inns to rest and refresh both you and your horse. As you make your way, you're worried that the convention may not succeed. Can a strong federal government be designed that will be acceptable to the states? How will the representatives be chosen? Can a true democratic government be created? What about the question of slavery? But as you ride along, you also feel a sense of excitement. After all, this is known as the Age of Enlightenment. Scientists like Isaac Newton have proven that the sun, not the earth, is the center of the universe, and that the planets move around the sun because of a force called gravity. That humans could use science to explain the workings of something as mysterious as the heavens was a revelation to mankind. If man could explain the cosmos, what wasn't he capable of explaining? Why couldn't he create a new form of government that served the people, rather than the other way around? There were some folks who thought George Washington should be made king, but most Americans wanted nothing to do with kings or queens. Kings, after all, ruled by something called divine right. Their powers were supposedly given to them by God and God alone, and their decisions reflected the will of God. What Americans wanted was a government created by the people and answerable to the people. A king had to answer to no one. Besides, the new scientific knowledge about the universe cast doubt on the authority of kingly rule. The great thinkers of the day described an idea called natural law, or law based on nature, which said that human reason alone could determine basic rules of moral behavior, and that reason could create a government that didn't have to depend on God's authority at all. This theory naturally led to the idea that men could govern themselves, and the conviction that men should govern themselves. In these ideas lay the root of democracy. From the idea of natural law came the idea of natural rights, that human beings were born with rights inherent in their very humanity that the government should protect. But what's the big deal about democracy, you might ask? Well, let's skip ahead to the 21st century. The fact that everyone can vote for their government is taken for granted in the US now, and complaining about the government is practically a national hobby. Many other countries around the world have adapted the democratic model for their own governments. Even England, the original oppressor of the colonies, has long had a democratic government where the Queen's role is mostly ceremonial. In 1787, though, the idea of a democracy is a revolutionary one. If the delegates of the convention succeed, they'll create a form of government like no other on earth. After all, most countries still operate under the idea of divine law, with kings, queens, emperors, and such, who believe that their power to rule has been provided by God. The delegates hope to create a new kind of government, where the people are truly represented. They don't just want an agreement between the states. They want a government for the citizens of the United States of America. During the course of a hot, humid summer, the delegates meet at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. With George Washington presiding as president of the convention, the delegates meet every day, writing with quills and ink on parchment paper, debating over how best save the United States. At night, using candles and oil lamps for light, they meet at the taverns and inns. After months of debate, on September 17, 1787, the delegates unveil their new design for America's government, the Constitution of the United States of America.
Well, all right. We hope you enjoyed that. You just did it, the first chapter of the topic. Now, just so you know, there are 4 more chapters to go in this app, and it will only take you about 45 more minutes to complete, and you are totally done. Now check this out. The app also comes with about 15 pages of analysis and summary that you can download and use any way you need to. Here's what you gotta do. You gotta click the link below and go directly to the Apple App Store and download the full app. It's fast and easy to do.